Okay, so today we are going to review the various selection tools that you have available to you for your collage project. Um, so on the left-hand side of your toolbar are your selection tools. First is your move tool. Second are your marquee tools, and if you click and hold, you get the flyout menu there, and you get rectangular marquee, elliptical, single row, and single column. For photographers, this isn't always the most useful, just because these sorts of shapes don't typically exist in nature, which is typically what you guys are photographing. Below that, again, if you click and hold it down, you get your lasso tools. So you have the simple lasso, polygonal lasso, and then the magnetic, and those have some pretty unique capabilities. Below that is your quick selection and your magic wand, which are also incredibly useful. So let's just discuss really quickly that selection tools, basically what they do is identify a particular area of your image. It is identifying specific pixels within that image, be it based on color or contrast or just where you decide you want to draw that shape. And there's 3 different levels of selections. You can have pixels that are actually selected. You can have pixels that are not selected. And you can have some pixels that are partially selected. So if I were just to press Command A, that would select my entire background. And you can see along the edge of my image I have my marching ants. Okay, so we're just going to use the rectangular marquee tool for right now. Again, as with any of the other tools that we've been using, the top bar gives you the different options for that particular tool. So here you could click down here and there's some different presets, but we're not going to mess around with that yet. Then here are your 4 options for how you are selecting pixels. So the first is new selection. This is the standard. This is basically always clicked. So if I click in my image and drag, it creates a selection. If I click again and drag, it creates a new selection. It's not maintaining that original selection. One thing to note with both the rectangle and elliptical marquee, if you hold shift down and drag, it will confine your image to a perfect square. Okay, so you guys can do that as well. So we'll get a perfect circle with the ellipse tool if you're holding the shift key down. Okay, the next is add to selection. You can click on this, or there's a keyboard shortcut. So if I were to click here, there's one ellipse and then there's another ellipse. Okay, so it's adding to that original selection. If you are just clicked on new, again, if you click and drag, now it's new, it gets rid of those original selections. But I can also press the shift key on your keyboard, and as you can see up on that toolbar here, once I press shift, it automatically switches to add. And then I can click, drag, and now I'm adding to that original selection. The third option is subtract from selection. And this will come in handy with some of your other options with the selection tools if you decide, oops, I selected a piece I don't really want selected. So you can click here and then you can click and drag and it will deselect those areas. So now the only part of my image that's selected is what is surrounded by the marching ants or the moving dotted line there. So basically, whatever I do to this part of the image right now, whatever is selected, it will only affect the area that's selected. So I can go and do some adjustments. So if I were to go up to image, adjustments, I'll play around with hue and saturation because it's easy to see. So it is only affecting the pixels that are selected to change it to that different color. Okay. Another area that you can adjust here in the marquee and some of the other options as well is the feathering of your selection. So you saw what happened when I made the color adjustment there. So we're going to click on New Selection. I'm going to change the feather to, let's say, 25 pixels. And I'm going to make that selection. Okay, and there it is. If I go up to Image, Adjustments, Hue Saturation, okay, you can see that it is a little bit softer. Okay, so it doesn't create that hard edge. So feathering is where you have pixels that are partially selected. And that's a good way to make sure that your edges are smooth and soft and not super harsh, depending on what you're selecting, and this can come in handy. You will not get a perfect selection the first time that you attempt to select an area of your image. I'm going to go undo. Okay, there we go. So you do have to try different things, and you will have to use additional tools as well. You can't just use one selection tool and then call it a day. Okay, so with your marquees, you have New, Add, Subtract, and then there's Intersect. Intersect basically means if I click and create a selection, and then I click and make another selection, it's only going to select the areas that are intersecting. Okay, so it gets rid of everything except for the areas that were intersecting. So think of like a Venn diagram, basically. Okay. What else do we want to talk about? Okay, so we'll do the polygon lasso right now, just to show you some interesting things with that. So the lasso tool, real quick, is just sort of like a really loose selection tool that kind of just does whatever shape you draw. It's very loose, very fluid. Okay. Again, you have those same options to change it to New, Add, Subtract, Intersect. The polygon tool will, it's basically a series of points, and they're connected by straight lines. So this comes in handy if you have something sort of geometric that you want to select. So you just click and drag and click and drag, click, click, and then you go back to where you started, and there's your polygon. Again, you can add, subtract, or intersect. You can also feather your pixels. Okay. So I'm going to do the polygon here just to show you one of the options. So if I hold the Shift key, it will make me draw a straight line, which is kind of neat. Okay. So I'm just creating that triangle. Actually, I don't want it to be like that. Hold on. So we'll do Shift. Okay, so there's one triangle. I'm gonna fill it in black, just so you can see what happens. My paint bucket tool, and I just fill it in black. Okay, go back to that polygon. Okay, so Anti-Alias was selected. Okay, on that one, I'm going to deselect this option here, and then I'm going to create a similar triangle. Sorry. Nope. Okay, and I will click on the paint bucket tool and fill that in. Now I'm going to click on my magnifying glass and zoom in. Okay, so you can see that when Anti-Alias was selected, it smoothed the pixels, right? Let me zoom in a little bit more. Okay, so pixels are basically these little squares that make up your image, and if they are, you will have a series of black and gray to create a smooth edge, whereas here you can see sort of a zigzag effect. Okay, so that helps to smooth your images. And right now I'm zoomed in 400%, so you'll never see an image this close up. But from here you can see that this is nice and smooth, whereas right here you see these little steps, which we would not want. So if anti-alias is ever an option with any of your selection tools, you should click it, okay, because it helps keep your selections nice and smooth. Okay, so we went over the ellipse. These are your lasso tools. I'm going to show you magnetic lasso in a second, and then we will go over some of your quick selections. Okay, so let me go and step backward. Okay. One of your quick selection tools is your magic wand. Okay, and what that does is it selects pixels that are all a similar color and value. Up here again you have your add, subtract, intersect, and then some other options. So for your magic selection tool, the sample size is telling the computer the number of pixels that you want to be sampled by the tool. Right now it's just a point, so it's going to select literally one tiny pixel, whichever one you happen to be, your mouse is above, okay? And then your tolerance is where you can set the range for sampling your color. So if it's super tolerant, will give you a completely different effect. So I'm going to knock this down to 1, and we'll do a point sample. We'll just do a point sample. So you can see here I literally only have, sorry, we want to zoom in, little tiny area selected. Okay, so if I go back to my magic wand selection tool, I'm going to click on 3x3 average. Okay, so that's going to select 9 pixels. 3x3 is 9. And I'm going to increase my tolerance to, let's say, 30. Okay, so fit on screen, and there I go. So now most of that sky is selected. There's some areas that it missed down here, so maybe I want to go up a little bit more and try it now. Okay, maybe that gives me a better selection. We have anti-alias checked here. Contiguous is checked, and what that means, it's only going to select pixel areas that are next to each other, that are directly touching. So you can see that areas of the sky within the tree are not selected because contiguous is checked. So I'm going to uncheck that, and I'm going to reselect the sky. Now you can see that the sky in between all of those leaves is selected. Okay. Now when you zoom in on an image like this, you're going to see that your selection is far from perfect, and you're going to need to clean that up. Okay. Some of the branches are missing here, although some of that will be pretty much impossible to get, but kind of get the idea. So let's just say we went through and we really fixed our selection and we have all of the blue sky selected, okay? But really what I wanted to do was create a new layer with just the tree and the grass, let's say. So what I would actually do is go to select up at the top and click inverse. Now all that's selected is my tree and my grass. And what I could actually do is hit Command C, Command V, and now I have that in a new layer with no sky. Okay, so here I could do some adjustments or whatever I want to do to this image. From there you could also say, okay, now I want to separate the grass from the tree. Okay, and you can do that. Now under your selection menu, you're going to have some different options here. So let's say you by accident deselected your selection. You can always go back and click reselect if you didn't do anything else to that. So there's my selection. let's say we did a lot of work and we know we're going to reuse that same selection. So by clicking on your selections menu up at the top, you can actually save your selection. Okay, so you're going to save it within your document. It'll be a new channel, and then you're going to name it. So the selection is tree and grass, and you can hit OK. Then you can go along, do things, do whatever you want to do. You can go back and reopen that selection. So let's say I do this, and then I select some other stuff. Whatever I do, go back to select, and I can click on load selection, and then I can find tree and grass, and there's my selection back again. So that's pretty good. Okay, so those are some of your basic selection tools. Something like this, again, you might want to start, like let's say I just want to select the cherry blossoms and not the sky. I might start with my magic wand, okay, and maybe it's not perfect. Maybe I hit shift and I can click on other areas and get it to be where I want it to be. And just keep in mind what is up at the top of your tool bar here. You know, how big of a selection do you want to be sampling? What's your tolerance level? Do you want to include areas that aren't necessarily connected? So would you want to click or unclick contiguous? Okay, so just keep that in mind as you work. Then, okay, so let's say I didn't show. Okay, so also here is your quick selection tool above magic wand. What this does is it's kind of similar where it's selecting areas of the image that are kind of similar, and you kind of draw with it. Okay, so I would maybe click here, and right now it's only going to sample a small area because my brush size is set to 30. But if you just kind of click and drag, it kind of fills in how far along you want to go, and you can see that it's giving me a pretty good selection around this dahlia. So let's say I want to use this dahlia in my collage. So I would go to select inverse. Now just my dahlia petals are selected. I would go to my move tool, and I have an untitled document here that I created for these purposes. So what I can do is actually click on my selection, go up to this document with that mouse there. Now it opens that document. Oops, sorry. And I can click and drop in that flower. Okay, and there it is. And here I can go and change the size. If you hold the shift key, it'll constrain those proportions. Okay, and yeah, always unclick before I'm ready. Okay. So there we go. Okay, and let's say we like that. Okay, so that is your quick selection tool. Now let me show you really quickly your magnetic lasso tool. So I'm going to zoom in so I can really see what I'm doing. So let's just say I want to select just the center of the flower for whatever reason. Your magnetic lasso tool holds the selection down against areas that are contrasted. Okay, so again, you can change some of the functions here. Frequency will help you get a pretty accurate selection. So let's just say I'll do 100. So what you do is you kind of click along where you want to start, and you can see that I have all these selection points, and they're really close together because I set my frequency for 100. And then you kind of click wherever you want to tell Photoshop that you want your selection to be along, and you don't have to be exact, because what happens is it sort of forces that selection tool down. This is another one similar to the polygon where you have to go back to where you started, and then when you see that little circle pop up next to your tool, you can click, and then it finishes the selection. If I change the frequency to, let's say, 10, I'm going to click on add to selection, so this way I don't have to hold the shift key down the whole time. So I'm going to start here, and I'm going to drag. you're going to see that those selection points are less frequent. Okay, they're only where I actually click or wherever Photoshop wants them. So go through and click around, okay, and it's going to stay where there's a difference. And you can see if I go away from my edge, it kind of forces you back to where Photoshop thinks you should be based on the pixel differences. So it helps you get a pretty clean selection. If you decide like, oops, I went over here and I didn't really want to, you can always hit the backspace and you can actually delete points and or the delete key, and you can delete those points and then go back to where you want to be. And there I am. So all of that extra stuff I just accidentally selected goes away out of my selection. Okay, now I'm just going to go back to connect here. Okay, so again, you can change your frequency. You can change different things here depending on what you want to do, but that is the magnetic lasso tool. Oops. Okay. And then you can use a variety of tools. So I just accidentally selected this area. I don't want this. Okay, so I can go to my ellipse or even just my regular lasso tool, and I can click on subtract from selection. And then I can just draw a lasso around this area that was a mistake, and it's unselected. And I still only have this area selected. Okay, so that is your magnetic lasso tool, which can be found here. Okay, and I think that about covers it as far as your selection tools. So again, what you would be doing is finding images for a collage. It can be flowers, fruit, vegetables, really whatever you want it to be, and you can create a face, a person, an animal, or you could do one of the quote projects, select a quote and illustrate that using different photographic images. You can use images you've taken, or using the Google image search to find high resolution images that way. Just make sure they're not copyrighted. Okay, so I'm going to close this. So I'll just show you really quickly something that I was working on. So here is a flower face. I used Gerber daisies for the cheeks as well as for the background of the face. Changed just the size of them. And I used various purple flowers to create sort of the hair. Incorporated some vines for some of like the loose bangs. Upside down calla lilies for the nose. Rose petals to create the shape of the lips. Okay, so these would all be, I didn't finish labeling these, but these would all be in different layers. So you need to have 10 different selections in at least 10 different layers. So you can see I kind of labeled it face, left cheek, right cheek, hair, eye. Okay, and again, I didn't finish labeling them. So all of these should be labeled. So if I make layer 8 copy invisible, I see that it's more of those purple flowers, which is part of the hair. So maybe I'll label that hair. Okay. So that is the basic gist of it. So you can, again, whatever you have selected, let's do this. I'll do quick selection tool. Do new selection. I will go around the edge of my dahlia. Okay, and then you may find when you zoom in on this, maybe areas are missing. So let's zoom in a lot. Oops, plus. Okay, so you see how this is sort of soft along the edge of the petal. And you have some of the background included here, so what you may decide that you want to do is you can go to your selections menu and you can actually refine your selection. You can modify it. So you can smooth it, you can expand it, contract it. If you want to expand it, let's say we want to expand it, I'll just show you what happens with like a large number. So if I hit 20 pixels, it expands that selection. Okay, remember I have the background selected, not the flower. Again, I can go back up to selections. I can go to modify, and I can make it smaller we'll do 25 pixels. Okay, so now more of that background is selected. You can also go to modify smooth. Okay, so there's some different options in here, and you're going to find what works best for you. Okay, so that's the basic overview of all of that, and we will go to select inverse. So now my flower is selected. I'm going to click on the move tool, and I will pick it up and drag it into here. Oops, didn't work. Get up here. Okay, so now I have my two flowers. You can overlap them. Again, if you pick up your layer and move it, you can change the order of the layer, which flower is in front of which flower. Okay, so always think about your layers palette as, you know, sandwiches. Here, this is in my background. Okay, your move tool will help you move your images, your items around. You can always go to edit, transform, and you can change the size and shape. You could even try some of the warping or distorting functions to create the shapes that you want. You don't want to warp too much because you still want it to look like the fruit or the flower that it is. So again, 10 layers. Here you can also Command C to copy, and then Command V. I gotta deselect this. Command V. And it will paste it in as well. So those are your options for getting all of your images into one document. Okay? And that about does it.